Why isn't the book of Enoch considered like canonical?
Because there is no indication that the prophet Enoch wrote it. It is what we call pseudepigraphal, meaning it is a writing attributed to Enoch, but Enoch did not write it. So why would we include a book in our canon that did not come from the prophet Enoch? Or Enoch, whether a prophet or not, we're not told explicitly, but if a prophet is someone that God speaks to in a miraculous way, like appears to him in a vision, or appears to him in time and space in visible form or in a dream, and he hears God audibly, then Enoch was a prophet in that sense, even though he's not said to be a prophet explicitly, and he wasn't there after the flood. He was taken to be with God, or God took him to the what we call the netherworld, the underworld, before the flood. So if he wrote a book, we don't have any historical evidence such a book was written by Enoch, because there's no mention of it in the books written by the Old Testament prophets after the time of Noah.
Okay. All right.
You get my point?
Yeah.
So then, if there is no indication that Enoch wrote a book, because he is what they call an antediluvian, meaning he is a pre-flood holy servant of God, a holy man of God, whom God spoke with and whom he walked before God in a manner pleasing to God, and God took him out of the earth without having to first physically die, and then transported him to the underworld. Well, if he did write a book, then that means Noah must have had a copy of that book, because everything was destroyed by the flood except Noah and his family, and there's only 7 family members and the animals that Noah brought on the ark. So that means Noah would have had to take in that book and then pass it on to his generations, to his sons and their children, and they would have to have copied it. But then if there was such a book that was copied and recopied, why is there no mention of it in the books of the Old Testament, when the books of the Old Testament do mention other books, such as the books of the war, the book of the wars of Yahweh, Yahuwah, and the book of Jasher, and the Chronicles of the Kings?
What about like the reference in Jude, or is that not actually a reference to Enoch?
No, that could be Jude quoting a book that was deemed authoritative by the people that he's writing to, because don't forget, in the New Testament, Paul and the others will quote writings that their audience accept as authoritative, not because they believe it's inspired, but because the people they're writing to accept its authority. Because that's what Paul did with the Greeks, the Athenians. In Acts 17:28, he quoted 2 Greek pagan writers, authors, poets, Aratus and Epimenides, to prove his point, because the Greeks that he was talking to accepted these writers as authoritative. Paul also did that in Titus 1:12, where he quoted a false prophet of the Cretans. That doesn't mean he believed these men were inspired or their writings are inspired, but he quoted them because the people he's writing to looked to these men as authorities and viewed their writings as authoritative. So Jude may have done the same thing. Or it's also possible that there was a tradition of Enoch prophesying that had been preserved orally and that eventually was written as part of the book of Enoch.
Okay, so it's possible like part of it might be like actual like...
Yeah, there is historical truths in the book of Enoch. Why? Because things could be passed on orally, and those oral traditions could be accurately preserved and then written down in a document and then attributed to Enoch falsely. I don't think everything Enoch is not true. I do believe it has a lot of historical truths, historical elements. For example, it's Enoch that tells us the sons of God in Genesis 6 were rebellious angels that left heaven and then had sex with women and sired hybrids, half angels, half human, and that these angels also taught mankind advanced sciences, astrology, zoology, botany, etc., etc.
Oh, okay.
Why wouldn't I believe that? See?
All right. Because like that would be like the best explanation, or like...
Say it again?
Like why do you trust that explanation though if you don't know if like it came from...
Because there are things in Enoch that find support in the books that we believe to be inspired by God and historically accurate. For example, does Genesis 6, 2-4 mention sons of God having sex with daughters of men? Yes, it's mentioned.
Oh, okay.
So does that then lead me to assume and believe that there would have been oral traditions that were passed on orally from one generation to the next? Because in Genesis 6, 2-4, it's very brief. It's brief. Sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair and beautiful and entered into them and had children with them. Well, obviously, the audience of Genesis would have known a lot more than what's written. Now, if Moses wrote Genesis 6, and I know he did, because the evidence shows he did, I'm not a liberal. I do believe Moses was inspired by God to record past history accurately. Then that means when Moses wrote Genesis 6, 2-4, something very brief, we would assume and expect that he would have elaborated on it. He would have explained it in detail to the Israelites. Therefore, what Moses wrote briefly, he would have expounded in great detail, and that detailed explanation could have been passed on word of mouth until finally some of those traditions were found in Enoch.
Right. Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you assume that when Moses wrote Genesis 6, 2-4, the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they entered into them and had offspring from them? That's all Moses would have said for 40 years? That's it?
No.
Don't you think there have been people like you to ask questions? Hey, Moses, what does this mean?
Right.
And do you think
like,
Moses would say...
all that was written down, only like the
and
main point.
do you think Moses would have said, hey, you know what? You only go by what is written. Don't ask me. Shh.
Right. Yeah. But like for us now, that's the only thing we don't need to
No, well, we do have traditions. That's the point. Enoch contains some of those traditions. So we don't assume everything in Enoch is not historical, that it's a complete fabrication. No, we assume that it does contain historical truths. There are elements that are historical, but we tread lightly and be careful.
Okay.
Right?